So we're going to begin. Welcome everyone to the 19th Annual NAB Wrap-Up. I'm Bruce Fulmer. Let me get my slide. New York Section Chair. I'm going to give some brief announcements and turn the podium over to Tim Dwight and Roberta Gorman for some SMPTE announcements and the program for tonight. Before I forget, please silence your cell phone. I'm one of the major violators of this, and I'm often running around looking for my cell phone ringing on the other side of the room, so don't embarrass yourself like I do. Also, the meeting is being recorded, so if you're in the witness protection program, you might want to leave. Otherwise, as all SMPTE meetings, when we have presentations here, we try to make a recording of them so we can repurpose them later on. In case you're one of the persons who couldn't make it, you could see it later on our website. And we've been pretty successful in getting recordings of about 95% of our meetings in the last 14 months. So, and thank you to HBO for helping us with that. I just went backwards. NAB Wrap-Up, here we are. That green thing is the pointer, so speakers, you've got a pointer here if you need it later. We are also on a live video conference with the SMPTE Long Island Subsection via Viacom in Happauge, New York. Thank you, Viacom. And we'll be seeing those folks on the screen later today. Section announcements. Election results. So we did have an election, and I don't think we won as the the section that had the highest percentage of participation, but we're getting closer. I think we had 22% or something like that. No, Bill? Not that much? That's John Furter, by the way, one of our governors. The Italians won again, I'm sorry to say, but maybe next year we'll give them a good run. Pardon? They had 30. They had 44%, and how many people are in the section? Okay, so nevertheless, we can give them a run for their money next year. Chair for 1-year term is myself. I took another year at this post. Secretary Treasurer, replacing the illustrious Herb Oland, is now Jeff Cohen. Jeff. And Herb's shoes are big shoes to fill, so we'll be helping Jeff from time to time. The job as Secretary Treasurer is a pretty intense job. Also, managers for the 2-year term beginning July 15th to July 2015 to June 2017. Bernice Herskovitz of New York 1. Bernice, can you make yourself known? I think you had served some years ago on the board. Is that right? Are you here? All right, so we have a female voice, and I just want to just take a little break pointing out that we also have a number of students here tonight, and we have 3 vibrant student chapters. There's a lot of women involved, so we are growing in our outreach. Thank you. Ken Hunnell was reelected of Dolby Labs, and Mike Strine of ABC Television. We have 2 subsections. The Connecticut subsection has reelected Brian Kobolars from Telecine Productions. Brian does a great job in the Connecticut subsection, and I'll post an announcement about what their next event is, and you'll see. And Wes Simpson, Wes is here, I believe, is Secretary Treasurer for 1-year term for Connecticut. Long Island subsection, Chair 1 year, starting this July, Raymond Blumenthal, Tiffin Corporation. Ray is on the other side in the Long Island remote conference. He'll say hello later. Secretary Treasurer is Jenna Rappelt-Knowles, both of Tiffin Company. I'd just like to thank everyone for running for the post board members or subsection officers, and thank those who ran and didn't make the cut on the election. We really are a board, an open board, so whether you were elected or not, and speaking personally, I was not elected some years, but I still participated. You can always pitch in, and I open that up to the entire membership. So a round of applause for our volunteer members. Initiatives to grow the section. Well, I've spoken about this before. We're reaching out to youth. We're reaching out to students. You'll see that we're going to do something about post-production, and I'll mention it later, but there is a group that we're collaborating on that called the Blue Collar Post Collective. They're 20 and 30, no, let's say 20, 30, maybe 40-ish workers in post-production that have gotten together through social media. And I know that I'm behind the brick walls of ABC television. I don't get around town a lot, so we're reaching out to the community to help us program, help us make events for the community like this one. And we have the student student chapters, as I mentioned. Upcoming events. Streaming Media East is on right now through Thursday. We are there with a SMPTE booth. If you happen to make it over there, stop by the booth and say hello. And one thing that we try to do is hang around the booth a little bit and explain what SMPTE is to other people who may be from a different viewpoint, a different part of the media industry, and garner, network to promote the society. Connecticut Subsection Tour. This is what I'm talking about. For Connecticut, May 30th at NBCU Sports. I'm going to just jump over this one and the New York section meeting next. HDR, More Challenges for Post-Production as our working title. And here we go. This is the detail. Connecticut Subsection meeting, Stamford, Connecticut, Saturday, May 30th, starting at 10 a.m. It should say here when, I believe registration is already open for this event. So there you go. Okay, SMPTE.org to register. Okay, will be posted tomorrow. Not to upstage us tonight. Section meeting, June 3rd, 2015. This will be at the Iris B. and Iris B. Gerald Cantor Film Center, NYU. It's a great venue, as is this one. HDR, More Challenges for Post-Production. We're just putting this event together. We have a number of people participating in discussion about the challenges of new formats, primarily HDR. And if you are in the business and dealing with this technology, reach out to Tim or myself. We're producing that event. Roberta, thank you.
Okay, great. Hello, everyone. First of all, Barbara Lang, who's our executive director, sends her apologies. She's still traveling after our Berlin event last week. And also our director of philanthropy, Mary Vinton, was going to be here to give a presentation, and she got the flu today. So I am very, very pleased to be here to speak to you tonight. And I want to pick up on something that Bruce said earlier about the streaming media show and people being in the booth. I want to express my thanks to the folks who are in the booth with me today who, me not being a technical person, were very, very, very helpful when the people came over and asked about standards. And I got that deer in headlights look, unfortunately. And I had experts there to really help and show what they thought of SMPTE, which means a heck of a lot more. What you think of it means a heck of a lot more than what I think of it. So thank you again for helping me with the booth, and thank you for all your support always. And here's our lovely presentation. Let's see, okay. Nope. There we are. We have a centennial coming up in 2016. If anyone's been under a rock and actually didn't know that, we'll be 100 years old, which is pretty exciting. And we have a campaign to strengthen our 3 pillars, which are standards, education, and membership. Because frankly, membership is nothing without the education and standards. You all know that. And we have 4 wonderful contributors so far: the Walt Disney Company, Dolby, Panasonic, and Technicolor. So if any of you work for those wonderful companies, thank you very much. We're quite excited about that. Yes. And our other centennial plans are underway. We're doing a documentary, and the trailer debuted at NAB, and we hope to have it ready for the conference in 2015. I think, well, I know the students here are familiar with the crowdfunding sites, but we did a campaign on Indiegogo and raised pretty good money on that for the documentary, and we're pretty pleased with the results. There's also a commemorative book that you can have on your coffee table. There are many things about SMPTE that I think we'll all find out when we read the book. I've been asked to find out who our first woman member is, which has been a bit of a challenge, so if anybody knows, just shoot me an email. But wait, there's more. We've begun planning for the technical conference in 2016, which promises to be pretty exciting. We're going to have a centennial in a box, which is an easier way for sections. Well, we're here, so we can always help you celebrate. But for the sections that are in other parts of the country and the world, we'll have a centennial in a box to help them celebrate. And we have some new members. I know that at Streaming Media today, we were talking about getting people from like OTT, from streaming. We have Netflix, hooray. Telstra as a diamond member, and Ericsson, and that's the $16,000 level, so we're very happy about that. Bill? And Blackmagic just upgraded on Monday, so did a little dance in my office on that. We're so happy for the support we get from all of you and from these companies. And we have more events coming up. Last week was a forum in Berlin. Next month will be entertainment technology in, entertainment technology in the internet age, which we refer to as ETIA, which is at Stanford University. Then every other year in Australia, there is a conference. That's in July. Then there is, there's IBC in September, which I'm sure you know about. And then there is our annual conference in October in Hollywood, and the HPA Awards in November in Hollywood. I'll let you read Barbara's quote for yourself. Well, I tell you, we're having a student film festival, which is in conjunction with the folks at HPA. And I think all you students out there who are interested, keep watching our site. We would love to have your contributions there. And we also have a campaign on social media called Life Without SMPTE. We encourage anyone to put up any kind of video, any kind of tweet to show what life would be like without standards, especially. A couple of years ago, NYU chapter did a little video for us, which took place in an ice cream shop that showed that we do need standards, because how big is big? What size is large? We encourage you to be creative, put this up, and we will send you a Life Without SMPTE t-shirt. And once again, I know on Barbara's behalf and mine and the rest of our staff in New York and our board. I would like to say thank you so much for everything you do, because it's pretty obvious to me that SMPTE is nothing without its members. So thank you so much for coming tonight, and without further ado, I would like to turn this over to Tim Dwight.
Well, thank you very much, Roberta, for that great SMPTE presentation. So I am Tim Dwight, the meeting producer. I have a few thank yous in order. One to Rich Torpy for producing the meeting in the Long Island subsection over at Viacom where he works, and to Viacom's generosity for setting us up with that. To Ray Blumenthal, the subsection chair of the Long Island subsection, and to HBO for their most kind generosity in providing us with this incredible venue and marvelous food, to Jenny Montalbano for coordinating all of this, Rachel Schiffman for the wonderful food, Ted Morano, projectionist extraordinaire, and so much more in this company. He runs that whole show, you've got no idea. And his assistant, Gary Mikominski, if I pronounce it correctly. And last but not least are the thank yous to you, the audience, you members and non-member students, everyone, etc. You make meetings like this happen. It's just so almost electrifying to have you here. We have a great turnout. I'm so glad we overbook our meetings by necessity. So we have a very great turnout here. And thank you, Mark Foreman, for the incredible slideshow of the pictures that you took year after year, especially this year at NAB. It just gives us, people who didn't go to NAB, such as myself, a real flavor of, what it was like. And I think seeing the slideshow for me is much better than, flipping through a magazine or so. You're seeing it with one of your SMPTE colleagues and with all of you. So for me, that's really wonderful. So thank you. Our panelists today are Craig Cuttner from HBO, Jason Dachman, Managing Editor of Sports Video Group, David Leitner, filmmaker, and Mark Schubin. There'll be a question and answer session after the presentations, which will also feature a live video conference, as we said, with the Long Island subsection. So just like in any live remotes, anything can happen. And we'll be seeing their pictures on the screen. They will jump in and unmute their system when they have the opportunity to jump in and talk and ask some questions. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Craig Cuttner, Senior Vice President of Advanced Technology at HBO. Take it away, Craig.
Thanks, Tim. Welcome, everyone. I restate every year. I don't know why they keep having me back. I'm actually not in the East Coast production group, and I thank them just as much as you for having this event every year.
That's why.
Oh, well, I think it's also because although I've attended NAB for over 30 years, I figured out that it's really about me keeping my remarks really short, because we all know it's about Mark. So the Mark Schubin show's coming up, but you have to get through me first. This NAB for me was a watershed. I usually peruse the hallways and go to the far reaches, and every year I always look for some device or some structure painted in alternating bands of international orange and white. This year I didn't find any. So it's funny because last week the cable industry, the National Cable and Telecommunications Association, rebranded their trade show in Chicago. Now it's called the Internet and Television Expo, INTX. So we might get a little over-under bet going. When is the NAB going to change their name to broadband? Take the B and make it broadband. I have a feeling it's going to happen. It's going to happen as soon as we see how many people stick with the auctions and how many people get out of the business, broadcasting is a little sketchy. But as previous years, HBO sent a large team of folks in very defined groups, very good subject matter experts, each looking for a particular subject area. So my group with Elmer Musser was specifically focused on the areas of next generation television, UHD, immersive audio, all the buzzwords, to go look and see what's real. Because as we all know from trade shows, especially NAB, you don't necessarily believe what you see. You bring it back to your shop and see if it actually does what it's supposed to. So I did borrow heavily from some of the other teams just so that I could give a little broader brush. But I'll report on some of the little innovative folks that had stuff in their garage or workshop. I always give a nod to vendors that moved the state of the art by at least 6 dB, and there were a couple of those this time, especially bonus points for those who also claim to violate laws of physics. That nod this year goes to a company called VNova, apparently in stealth mode for several years. They have some vision and compression scientists over in Europe, and they had a non-MPEG compression system. And the demo, besides the usual lossless and visually lossless, they handed a iPhone playing 720p video with a fairly decent picture, really good picture, under 500 kilobits. Now, kind of cool. So that deserved the kick the tires if it's real mode. There were tons of exhibits on 4K, obviously, and HDR. And I think other panelists are going to talk about that quite a bit. But I will say that there's a lot more uncertainty, having lived through the SD to HD transition for many, many years ago. It's an acid flashback to the days of the chaotic tension between what seems simple to uncertainty to chaos. It's all there right now. Is it static or dynamic metadata? Is it 40,000 nits? Is it 4,000 nits? Is it 1,000 nits, or what is it? So clarity, please. Come on, SMPTE study group. We're all counting on you to make something out of this. Speaking on being on the prowl for new technologies, there was a neat little idea. It's always that little idea that somebody puts into their product that's like, they really were thinking about this. A company called Intupix had a light compression so that you could put 4K over HDSDI. Okay, so it can carry data, it's a digital stream, but their trick was, in the middle of what was effectively a data stream, they embedded a thumbnail image of what the actual content was, so that you could hook your traditional HDSDI test equipment and know what was on the wire. That was a pretty cool idea. Another small company that we uncovered is called TAG. And many of your facilities have huge monitor walls with lots of multi-viewers and lots of equipment. Well, this was a different approach where they took little almost Raspberry Pi kind of devices. So it was a very flexible monitor wall, but actually was very simple in its configuration and easy to add building blocks and put things over IP, etc. So that was kind of cool. And last but not least, one of my little favorites that we discovered quite a while ago is a company called Einetsat. And they make, long before it was cool, and there were some announcements this year, including some major announcements by broadcasters to do cloud stuff. This little company from their garage in Uruguay came up with an idea to use a 1 rack unit generic server, and they even have one of those little micro PC form factors, connected to the Amazon cloud, runs Harris Louth, imagine. Louth playlist, which I pick your old name for the old vendor. But it actually will run a network with a generic little tiny PC, graphics overlay, international subtitles in every language, including Asian character fonts, multiple audios. Fantastic little company. Just brilliant bunch of guys in a garage in Uruguay. So if you ever have a chance to check out Inetsat, it's pretty cool. But anyway, I'm going on too long. So let's get on with, I won't say get on with the Mark Schubin show because there's more speakers, but you know what you want. So thanks.
Well, thank you very much, Craig. Next up is Jason Dachman. Jason's a member of the SVG, or Sports Video Group, editorial team since 2009. He covers the business and technology of sports video production. As editor, he oversees all aspects of SVG America's editorial output, including the SVG Insider newsletter, sportsvideo.org website, and SVG's annual Sports Tech Journal and Remote Sports Production Yearbook print publications. Wow, that's a mouthful. Dachman also serves as program director for several SVG events, including the Sports Asset Management and Storage Forum, Sports Graphics Forum, and Transport. Please welcome Jason Dachman.
Thanks, Tim. I'm here to be another opener for Mark Schubin. Since I'm likely, I would say probably the least qualified person in this room, I will stay to what I know, which is live sports. Essentially, each year we put together a blog at the show, leading up to the show and during the show. This year we had 9 writers, 4 from the European side, 5 from the US side. And really produced a lot of content. Whether or not it's quality content, I'll leave to you. But there's some good stuff in there, so if you want to check it out, it's sportsvideo.org/NAB 2015. And while I am very busy on the floor, I am unable to visit every single booth as a certain other person that will be on the stages, because I'm not superhuman as Schubin is. But I do try to take a few minutes whenever I'm on the floor to try to kind of case any of the big sports production executives that I see. Just ask for a quick 2 minutes off the record, ask them what's going on, whispers from the floor, buzz, things that you're not going to hear from any of the stands, that type of thing. So I will save that for last. But I'm going to try to keep it short and sweet, and there'll just be a few quick things that I think were the big themes of the show from the live sports production landscape. And we'll go ahead and start with something that has been happening for a couple of years, really it's always happened, but I think the ramp up over the last couple of years really manifested itself at the show. You saw so many booths with, lesser exhibits that from companies that used to be standalone. The big one that really kicked off the show that I think was a surprise to a lot of people, at least to me, and usually these things don't come out of the blue for me, was the Avid ORAD deal. It really, I think, was a big move for Avid. We'll see how it ends up playing out. But interesting. And then some of these other ones I highlight here. I'm not going to go through every single one, but one of the big ones from the live sports angle is NEP, who is the preeminent, hopefully nobody hears me say that, the largest, we'll say, mobile production provider in the U.S. and really kind of in a lot of Europe as well. They've, I believe, they've acquired 9 companies in about a year and a half. So they're really consolidating to the point where one of their primary competitors, Alliance Productions, has expanded their membership. They're not an official company. They're just a collection of mobile providers, and they're adding a lot of new companies, with 1 or 2 that I know are going to be added in the next couple of weeks that at least in my business, should be a big deal. And the last one there is Stats. Obviously, the sports industry is really being driven right now by a lot of data-driven graphics, a lot of analytics, whether it's on the coaching side or the broadcast side. It's a huge business right now, and you see these businesses exploding. Stats has acquired, Bloomberg Sports was the big one, but I think 6 companies in 18 months. And if you go to sportsvideo.org tomorrow, you will find out that they bought another company, but that's under embargo until 9 a.m. tomorrow morning. Along with that, the venture capital investment has just gone off the charts lately. There seems to be an interest from the money holders in this sector right now, which I think is a good thing. I guess we'll find out. But you've seen companies like Chiron Higo totally change the way that they do business behind closed doors, and went from a company that had a lot of bad press with being delisted and things to having, I think, what I thought was a very positive NAB. Their business and profits have grown, and they've done really well in sports. Broadcast Sports Inc. was acquired just after the show, but we had heard about it at the show, and believe me, there's at least 4 or 5 more that have not been released yet that I think are going to be a big deal. They're big names that you know who they are, and you'll find out that down the road. I am not even going to touch some of the imaging stuff on these 2 big announcements with the Sony HD 4300 and Grass Valley LDX Universe. I will leave that once again to Mark Schubin. But in terms of the way that it's impacting the live sports production business, I do find it pretty fascinating. I'm going to focus kind of solely on the impact on the business, but the real reason that you saw so much excitement around these 2 products with a lot of early commitments from some major mobile production providers and sports broadcasters was the optional license to go 4K or ultra slow-mo with these cameras. You can go one day on, one day off, depending on what your needs are. And it's literally a matter of just a software upgrade. The feedback that I heard at the show and well beyond, both of these were pretty poorly kept secrets, I think. I think a lot of people knew these were going to come out well before the show, was extremely positive. I'll start with the Grass Valley. Last year when I want to say like March is when they started selling it, the Grass Valley LDX Extreme Speed 6x slow-mo. It was a massive hit in the sports industry, and it sold. I don't have a specific number, but I know that Mobile TV Group alone bought 30. It's become the standard on most Fox Sports regional sports shows. It's really just been embraced because it's not standing alone on an island like a lot of the ultra slow motion cameras have been the last few years. It's integrated into the telecast. It's easy to shade, and it goes directly into the normal workflow without having to create, like I said, this whole other island. So this is the next step on that. Essentially, takes it to the next level, and then obviously with the 4K capability, they also released the K2 Dino Universe, which is the companion replay server that goes along with that. It promises that it won't make you double the number of servers and rack space and operators for 4K replay. We'll see. But I'm sure it'll be great. The early commitments from that they released at the show, Mobile TV Group, Lion Video, NEP, Bexel, VER, Fletcher Sports, the Oakland Athletics, and the Cleveland Cavaliers had already committed. Those are units that have already been sold. So Mobile TV Group, who works most of the regional sports telecasts in the United States, took Grass Valley's 4K / 6x slow-mo, method and kind of ran with it. They announced in December at our event, the SVG Summit, that they were going to launch a 4K truck. That evolved very quickly when Grass told them what their plans were. They now launched a truck at NAB called 38 Flex that can be switched, maybe not in a day, but very quickly, between 4K, all cameras, potentially 6x slow-mo, 1080p, 720p, or 1080i. So very, very flexible. The idea being that they're going to pay a lot. They're going to put a lot into the infrastructure and the connectivity of this truck. Similar to HD, they're probably not going to work a lot of 4K shows at the beginning, but you make the investment now. You figure out that this is kind of future-proofing this truck for the future. Phil Garvin, who is the founder and president, he said he has received significant interest from the 4K shows, but quote that the 6x slow-mo shows are going to be the truck's real bread and butter, probably for now. He said the demand for 6x is simply incredible. In our view, the only way to do sports going forward is that every or most cameras should have 6x slow-mo capability. That truck will travel with 6 of the new Grass Valley LDX universes and 5 standard Grass Valley HD cameras. Moving to the Sony. Same thing. They have the optional licensing to go up to 4K or up to an 8X ultra slow motion capability. You can go down from there 6 or 3. They also received some huge early commitments from Game Creek Video, NEP, Bexel, for their clients like CBS Sports, Fox Sports, and NBC Sports. It made its debut already, actually, at the Kentucky Derby about a week and a half ago. And I spoke to Dave Mazza, who's SVP and CTO at NBC Sports and NBC Olympics, or my colleague Karen Hogan spoke to him, and just a real quick quote from him. "The new camera is really sensitive, allowing us to get back a decent lens aperture, even when running it 8 times, which gave the camera operator back the depth of field that they're used to. The camera looked great in any mode we put it in. The best thing I can say is it just looked like a Sony." So some good early reviews. We'll see how that goes from now. Like I said, I'll let Mark obviously get much deeper into it, but in terms of the business potential of these 2 units, I think it's massive, and I think it's a nice bridge to 4K because slow-mo has become such an integral part of live sports shows. It's just extremely important. So by kind of having that little rabbit in front, that little carrot in front, it makes you want to go to this model. The next thing, this is kind of a broad trend that we've been seeing, extensively over the last few years, but really has heated up over the last maybe 18 months, and that's this what we're calling at-home production model. There's lots of different names for it. Some people call it remote production. Some people call it centralized production, but we're calling it at-home production, and we're stamping that. This is really the biggest transformational thing that we're seeing in sports. The idea essentially being, when you really boil it down, backhauling cameras and other sources from remote production back to a centralized control room at the broadcast center, where the live telecast or stream, depending on where it's going, is cut, integrated, and distributed. So director, producer, graphics, everybody's at home. Essentially, the cameras are out there, comms are linked, audio feeds come back, usually embedded, and you produce the show from home. Obviously, this cuts down on any kind of travel and hotel costs, or for big events, the World Cup and the Olympics. If you talk to the bodies that supply accreditations there, it's like getting a Willy Wonka golden ticket. It's crazy. So that saves money there. Obviously, it reduces on-site facilities because you're really just sending out cameras and mics and things that are really in the field rather than inside the truck. Where we've really seen this, and I'll get into some of the people that are doing this in just a second, is the lower tier events. And the NCAA Olympics, even some high school sports, less popular pro sports. I won't name any names on what sports they are, but and it's stuff that wouldn't have been available to viewers in the past at all. But because there's this slimmed down production model, you can do it cheaply. Why not throw it out there for this little niche? Maybe some parents who want to see their kid wrestling, and that's the advantage to recruiting or getting more students. And as long as there's not a huge production cost for it, it makes a lot of sense. The other advantage is the collaboration, and this has been going along for a few years. ESPN's X Games productions have been doing it for several years, essentially locating their entire post-production team at home, allowing them to dip into their EVS bins or any of their content bins, whatever it might be, on site, and then over very, very strong connectivity or a spare R signet or some kind of file transfer, sending this stuff home so you can produce packages at home for quick turnaround highlights for halftime and these type of things. And then on-site studio shows, which are really big right now on large events, they're expensive. You usually have to roll a whole nother truck out a lot of the time. So if you can just bring 3 to 5 camera feeds back instead of producing a show out there, it's extremely cost-friendly, and you can still have an on-site studio. That said, the connectivity at a lot of these venues just isn't there, and it's kind of funny the opposite scenario that exists here, because the events that usually need this model the most, which are the lower tier events, don't have the connectivity to do it. So that's where you kind of run into a little bit of an obstacle, but that's coming along pretty nicely. And then also, trucks don't come cheap. And there's a lot of money that have been poured into the traditional model. So there's a little bit of hesitance to say, well, we paid all this money for this truck, we got to pay it off. So, which you can understand. So we'll kind of see how that goes. The big users of this model so far have been the big conference networks. So Big Ten Network, Pac-12 networks, and SEC Network, which is an ESPN operation essentially. So they built out huge pipes between all their campuses and their broadcast center, which for BTN Chicago, Pac-12 San Francisco, SEC is Charlotte, that that all came back. So everything is connected. Each one of them have a central control room at their broadcast center. They bring in camera feeds from each campus over these fiber networks, and they'll have the same production team produce 2-3 games in a day. Just from the same control room, work an 8-hour shift, produce 3 games. I think it's what a lot of people have envisioned for many years. They do it on an every day. I think Pac-12 it's thousands of events that Pac-12 is going to be doing this year. ESPN has taken an interesting model. They call it the REMI model, which stands for Remote Integration. They're doing similar things, but they've also done MLS games, 6 MLS games, 8 WNBA games, and they bring back cameras for those games. Sometimes it depends on the connectivity. If the connectivity is there, then they use fiber. If not, they use satellite, which it can be a little costly. But that's where some of these advanced compression technologies come in. That's what they're looking at, sending more feeds over less bandwidth. Maybe that starts making sense using satellite where there's not connectivity. Univision, they run off the Switches fiber network, and they're still working on theirs. But essentially, all they travel is they travel their on-air talent, which is 2 people, a producer, and an engineer. That's it. And camera people are local, audio people are local, and that's it. So that's huge cost savings. Not everybody's happy about that. A lot of people got into the remote production industry to travel and to be on the road. So not everybody's happy. But from an economic standpoint, that makes sense. So at NAB, I can't even go over all the stories. It seemed like there were different aspects at the show, whether it catered to better compression, whether it catered to IP production, whether it catered to various pieces, SDN technologies. It's all kind of moving in this direction, and it's just whether or not how far it goes, whether or not maybe trucks in the field start doing different things, whether they're eliminated entirely. I think that question is still up in the air, but even some booths that didn't realize they had technologies or weren't marketing that they had technologies for these kinds of use cases usually had them there. Okay, drones, so these are fun and everybody loves seeing them, and they're flying all around the convention center and everybody just couldn't get away from them. I will say that the first thing, I have seen so much pessimism towards drones from the live sports community. I know that news is a lot more excited about them, but that was kind of almost a running gag when I would talk to people. You can't, walk 10 feet in this place without you think it's a bat, but it's really just a drone flying at you. That said, everybody's trying them. So NBC Sports Group used drones at the Arnold Palmer Invitational at Bay Hill in Orlando for beauty shots and course previews. Was not live. ESPN used a company called Vortex Aerial at the Winter X Games in Aspen on their X course. So if you kind of see this guy's about to go over a jump, it's a really cool shot, and they did take that live. And so that worked out pretty well. There were some, as always, sound issues. You need quiet, but it was very stable, and the battery life was an issue in the cold weather. But for an event like this where there's time between runs, you land it, you switch it out, you have 50 batteries on hand, it's fine. Fox Sports did it for some AMA Supercross, again, kind of testing it on these lower end events and maybe using it on larger events later. There's not a lot of risk if something goes wrong at a motocross event. And it seemed to work really well. They did live shots, but it was during practice, so they didn't actually use them in the live production, but they did take live shots. So the overwhelming sentiment from the people, and now I'm getting into the non-booth talks, the sort of just talking to some sports industry leaders that I talked to on the floor, is especially on the smaller scale stuff, colleges and coaches and these kind of things, is just shoot now and ask later. These drones are available. Maybe we're not allowed to use them, but we're going to do it anyway, and probably nobody's going to really get mad at us at this point. Obviously, if you're dealing with something that's on national television, that's a different story. They're going to find that out. But if it's for almost personal use in terms of coaching and things around campus and that kind of thing, even though it is around people that have not signed waivers and it's like legit against FAA regulations, they're doing it anyway. the legal presentations, if anybody stopped by there, it was like the most packed room in the house. It was really crowded. Everybody wants to know what the specifics are, how they're going to get around some of these rules or what the rules are. That was something that I was fascinated by. I mean, it was like you couldn't get in. You really couldn't even get in some of these rooms. Obviously, the nice thing is the Spider Cam has become huge on sports shows. It used to be a thing that was just on Monday night and Sunday Night Football, and now it's everywhere. This is a cheaper option and could get probably even better shots depending on how you look at it. The other thing, like I said, there's drones everywhere, and while there was no shortage of these vendors, one of the big things that everybody was saying was most of these guys aren't signed off. They're there and they're demoing these things, and it's really exciting, and they're showing you these great shots, but they might have gotten a one-time use for this or that kind of thing. So what they had said, and a lot of people have tested these and run into issues, every end user I talked to said, if I have to make one call to the FAA, then that's not a company I'm going to use. And that's how everybody should think about it. If you're dealing with that yourself, then you don't have the vendor that you should be using. That's what the sports guys said. News very well could be different. The last thing, and this came from the X Games, as far as I know, unless regulations have changed, drones still can't fly within 500 feet of spectators. That makes it impossible to be at any sporting venue with a stick and a ball in the United States or pretty much anywhere. Or soccer, sorry for soccer fans. So, I mean, we're really a long ways away, depending on if regulations change. But most people, like I said, are extremely pessimistic about all this. And then this is kind of the fun one. It's my last slide. I thought the buzzword of the show was agility. Everyone was talking about staying agile, whether that's moving to an IP-centric infrastructure, whether that's these e-licenses that I was talking about. Everyone is scared to invest because they don't know what's going to happen over the next few years. So they're trying to prepare themselves to essentially not make bad decisions. Similar to, I think, what a lot of people went through in HD, I'm sure. But agility is what everybody was like. I want to stay agile. I want to, just basically kind of, I'd rather fuck up later than now, was what a lot of people had said. So the most buzzed about company was a company that didn't even exhibit on the floor, and that's MLB Advanced Media. They are, they're everywhere right now. With the HBO Now launch, they already have run ESPN3 and watch ESPN's TV Everywhere app for years. Same with March Madness Live. They launched WWE last April. They are doing Sony PlayStation's View TV service. And then right after the show, PGA Tour Live announced that they'll be using them. And this is a signal, of something similar. People are afraid to invest a lot of their money and trust their own infrastructure and maybe even people in something that they don't know. So they're outsourcing and saying, BAM knows what to do. They deal with massive, massive amounts of content and ingest it into Chelsea right down the street all the time. Why don't we just hand it over to them? They know how to do it. Joe Inzerillo is the smartest man on the planet, and they'll figure it out. So that's kind of how they were doing that. This is the number one sentence that I heard the most, was that their bosses, not you guys, but guys who and women who make these budgets and decide where the money is going to go, are still bitching about not making a dime on HD, quote unquote, not a dime on HD. So why should I invest into 4K? And then the 3D issue made that even worse and compounded it, because anybody that invested in that, obviously the money man was not happy about that. So that goes more into this agility thing of where is, how do I prepare myself? How do, I'm not going to get a full 4K plant ever, according to my boss. So how do I, figure out ways around that? I won't touch this because Mark's getting in there, but HDR and wide color gamut, I heard mentioned a lot more than not mentioned more, but people had more importance on those two elements than just 4K. I think everybody now finally understands that 4K is great with a bunch of pixels, but a lot more plays into that. And I think many of you probably have understood that for a long time, but on a broader scale, that's very much accepted now. This is a nice little treat. So I can't get into specifics, but there will be multiple, 3, as of I know right now, live 8K sports productions to take place in North America over the next few months. So you'll be hearing about them. Check back to sportsvideo.org. You can obviously assume who the foreign broadcaster is, who's going to be involved in those productions, but there's some rights holders here, and they're pretty high-profile properties. So it's going to be really exciting, and I think that that's a sign that it's really moving along quickly. This was something, everyone talks about cord cutting, blah, 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 whatever. A lot of the leagues and rights holders are saying that they are finally getting pressure from their higher ups, and that budgets are starting to dwindle as a result of lost subscriber fees, and other lost revenue sources, because of some of these things, and people are starting to get scared. Now, maybe that's still years and years in the making, and there's a lot of things happening, but it's coming up in meetings at the very least. It's not something that everyone's kind of scared about in the future. It's something that's impacting them now. And then the last thing, and this was before the Pacquiao-Mayweather fight, actually, which is where I think a lot of people freaked out about the Periscope and Meerkat user-generated live streaming. A lot of people were talking to me saying they were very, very scared about the impact, or interested in the impact, and how maybe they can embrace fan user live streaming of events. And then Mayweather-Pacquiao happened, and supposedly they lost, a few million of the billion that they made or whatever, to people that were illegally streaming off of Periscope via Twitter. And that's something that I think everybody needs to keep an eye on in terms of what's going to happen over the next few years. So that was longer than I intended it to be, but I am done. So I appreciate it. And in case anybody has any questions, feel free. We're big supporters of SMPTE, and SVG has always been big fans of all of you, and I appreciate you guys inviting us here. Thanks.
Thank you, Jason. That's terrific. Next up is David Leitner. David is an active producer, director, and director of photography, also an industry journalist, technical consultant, and motion picture chair of the SMPTE New York section. Please welcome David Leitner.
Actually, how many of you were at NAB? Wow. It looks like half the room. I'm giving you a series of impressions. I was assuming that fewer people had been at NAB. I want to share some of my impressions. Like Mark, Schubin, I used to walk every aisle of it. This is my 25th or 26th NAB. I used to walk every aisle. And I don't know if it's age or the fact that the explosion of technology is overwhelming. But I got there this year, and I was daunted. I ran around. I was there from Saturday, and I left Thursday night. I ran around like crazy. I didn't see a third of the things I wanted. So I'm going to give you a series of impressions. I'm not going to even cover some of the things I would have liked. There are a few things that I dropped because I want to give a LITE light version because we have another speaker. It's going to be a long evening. And I'm going to race really fast through some things. I was going to go into 8K. I called it more K than 4K, but I'm not going to do that. And hope Mark goes into that a little bit. I was going to go into high dynamic range, but then, when you take pictures of high dynamic range with a non-high dynamic range camera, it doesn't show any difference. And I took quite a few of them, and I wasn't able to even demonstrate that. I presume this is the slide thing. Is there a laser pointer in here too? Thank you. Okay, great. I want to start off with showing SMPTE at NAB, which seems appropriate. Every year, every time I show slides of NAB at SMPTE, I always show the booth. Booth is one of the more welcoming places there. I want to show one image that I think captures perhaps what I felt and many others felt. This was from the Sony press conference. That's Alex Shapiro. And so you have Sony, which might be the present or the past. You have YouTube, which might be the past or the future. And and 4K, of course, which is leading to more K. And I just thought in that one image, you see that we're at this it's not a fork in the road, but it's a turning point of sorts. There's a lot of confusion. Jason previously mentioned that one thing he heard was that owners had said that they didn't make a dime off of HD. I come from the independent production world, and I think it never even occurred to us we were supposed to make a dime. So my approach and my thought process is a little bit different about some of these things. For instance, when it comes to drones, we never ask permission. The motto this year was crave more, and I have to tell you that that threw me for a loop, because I'm still today not sure what it meant. It seems to say crave more information, but that's not what I think. I think they meant crave more stuff. And I'd like to suggest that that's inappropriate on some level. It made me uncomfortable. Strangely enough, Sony always has a motto, and most of them are kind of dopey, kind of goofy. But this year, Beyond Definition seemed to me to be a better motto than what NAB chose. You can see it's used in their presentation, because what they meant by it, and this is one of Sony's slides that I took a picture of, Sony 4K is not only resolution, higher frame rates, higher bit depths, higher dynamic range, and I think that sums it up in a nutshell. We're all moving from 8-bit to 10-bit to 12-bit to other 16-bit to more bit systems. Many of us are working with log-type gammas who are not in television. Many of us are already beginning to experiment with wider gamuts, P3 in the motion picture realm. Welcome back, Panasonic. I wanted just to tip my hat. Came out with a great camera. It's a Cine camera. Over on the right says Panavage Viacom 35 with Cine accessories. Panasonic's been missing from this realm for some time. But they're back, and they're back in a big way. You can see this on a dolly and a motorized arm. Also, this camera represents one of the trends that I'm just going to glance over quickly, which is modular build. That is the user interface which popped off the side of the camera and via a cable allows you to completely control the recorder back half of this camera, because this camera breaks apart into a recorder half and a camera head half. Reminds you of the early days of Betacam, but it's not. That's a whole different era and a different story. Camera trends at NAB also include new materials, composites like carbon fiber. Light and Strong, this is over at Really Right Stuff, and that kid was only too happy when I suggested that he hang from the tripod. Look at Sony's camera. Look at the texture on the build of that camera. What does that look like? Doesn't look like aluminum to me. How about this camera, the Red Weapon 6K? What's that material look like? It's carbon fiber. Why are they doing that? Light. Why do they need light? Drones, I might suggest. Arri Alexa Mini, what's that made of? That's carbon fiber. And a very happy customer on the end. That's Rodney Charters, who shot a lot of Shameless and a lot of other fantastic television shows. And he's demanding one immediately. Now, the Alexa Mini was really made or inspired by the need to have a small box camera, like the size of a Red Epic that could go on a drone, let's say. But look what Rodney's done. He's already got a viewfinder on it. He's got a shoulder pad on it. We know where this is going. Panasonic, this little, it's a 1-inch sensor inside of this thing, and I'll probably mention this again in a few moments. But look at the texture of that. What's that material? That's not magnesium, at least not on the outside. One venerable material, wood. Can't beat it. Can't beat it wherever there's the human touch. Hand grips, and Vocus decided to use it in a focus device. Viewfinders, really quick. It's been the bane of many of us using these small cameras. They don't have decent viewfinders. Of all people, Blackmagic comes out with an OLED viewfinder that's kind of interesting, actually. It has an SDI feed. You have to hook it up by SDI. Two people at NAB told me they were already thinking of trying to modify it and put it on other cameras. It's about $1,500, so I don't know how that'll work out, but it might. Zacuto came out with a viewfinder. These are, you could call these second or third generation attempts. They're getting smaller. Up here, whoops, trying to hit them. Up here you can see they've got a battery implanted in the side. That makes it not light. I took this picture because one of the problems with these type of viewfinders is they block the face, so the person being filmed can't see the face of the person filming. Certain kind of documentary work, that's problematic. Down here, I stuck a camera inside the viewfinder to show you what you're actually seeing inside the viewfinder. Look at the diagnostics down here. That's pretty cool. I don't know how accurate they are, but they're there. That's more than we had in the past. This is Small HD's finder. They've got an interesting idea. This is a 5-inch display. It's kind of like holding up a big iPhone, and it's hinged right here. And the display folds into this, and there's a mirror back here, which mirrors it into the eyepiece. It's a little primitive. I think it works. Here's a couple of pictures. You can see what it looks like. It's lighter when you pick it up than you think it is. So maybe that'll work. Handheld 4K was another little trend that's beginning to rise up, and this is the Panasonic that I mentioned a moment ago, 4K. They're introducing it here. It'll be out later this year. 4K cam is what JVC is calling their series of cameras. They've got a GY-LS 300. It very uniquely uses a micro four thirds lens mount in front of a Super 35 sensor. A little bit akin to the Sony E-mount, about, 20 millimeters flange focal depth, very, very shallow. They're using H.264 up to 150 megabits per second. And Craig Yanagi of JVC said to me, 4K for 4K. And I waited for the other shoe to drop. I said, well, we've heard that before, right? I'm not sure. I don't know if he got it or not. You all remember that, right? Remember where that came from? Remember the beginning of Red camera? 4K for 4K. What's a Red cost now? Interesting. Now, the GY-LS 300 lets you do something I have never seen before in a camera, never. It's really interesting. It lets you dial in the image circle size by percentages to adapt to coverage of various lens formats. Up there you can see it says HD. Right there it says Super 16. I don't know if you can see it from where I'm standing. This looks a little fuzzy, the image, but you see the circle, the lens circle? So it allows you to use the fact that a CMOS sensor can window to dial in different sensor sizes. Now, what does that mean? It also means you could put a lens on the camera that was a wide-angle lens, and you could dial into the picture and, in effect, have a different focal length, or at least angle of view. Really interesting. I've, again, never seen anything quite like this before. Tiny 4K cams. Well, duh, okay, we all know about this, but I'm still stunned. I'm sorry. I walk in there and see 4K 30 video from GoPro. Stunned. The quality, I mean, I always look at that little GoPro camera and think, how good could the lens be? But I don't know. I'm sure they've got that worked out. IO Industries, I believe they're Canadian, cute little camera. Uses a CMOS designed sensor, same sensor that was in the Blackmagic. Ursa camera and some other cameras, Scion, Aja, I believe, has a similar or the same sensor. I put my iPhone down so you could see how big this is. It has 4 3G SDI inputs. I like the Cinecam. This is an HD camera, but look at the gearing that's been set up to run this by remote. I just thought that was cool. The opposite of tiny 4K cams. I saw this guy lugging this thing around, and I don't know if you can quite tell, but that thing is really, really heavy. Well, what is it? It's a Blackmagic Ursa. Now, I was fascinated for about a nanosecond because I've never seen a Blackmagic Ursa in the field. In the wild. I should say in the real world. And yet, there were about 20 or 30 of them on the floor at NAB. Where did they come from? I'll let you guess that they were given out. And as a result, they were everywhere. And so I watched as they were being used to film various things. And I have to say, it's the weirdest camera. This thing, you know, someone might say, well, okay, you'd have to put a monitor on the side of the camera. Anyway, it's weird. It's just weird. And then you look at the, I guess I don't have a picture of the other side. There's a gigantic series of LEDs that represent a VU level on the other side. Who wants a VU level that big that can be seen by everyone in the room? I don't get it. The really funny thing about this camera is this camera is really, really heavy. Have any of you picked it up? Do you remember what curling is from the Olympics? It's very similar. I'm trying to remember. I knew it at one point. It was like 16 pounds or something. I'm not making this up. Really, really heavy. So Blackmagic, kind of to compensate, came out this year with something quite the opposite. This is the little Blackmagic. I think they're calling it Micro. Really, really, really tiny. And it's hardly bigger than the mount. And it has this little connector right here, which is borrowed from, according to Grant Petty, borrowed from amateur aircraft people. They use that kind of connector for their controllers. And he says that eventually you'll be able to control this camera. They're opening up the protocols to developers who want to automate, for instance, lens operation with this camera. I don't know. It's interesting. It's not out yet, so we don't really know what it adds up to. And then this is something they introduced called the Mini Ursa. Ursa being bear, Ursa's the big heavy one. This is the little heavy one. And it's really solid. The funny thing about this is you pick it up, yes, it's heavy, but the funny thing is it's also ergonomic enough that when you put it on your shoulder, it feels like an old CP16. And that's not necessarily a bad feel. I have to say, I have to hand it to them. With the viewfinder on it, it very much works as a shoulder mount camera. I don't know if this camera will be as slow in ISO as some of their other cameras are. All that remains to be seen. It's not out yet. I'm going to skip for a second to archiving. Why am I doing this? Because in the middle of the week, I went to the Las Vegas Super Meet, and that's run by the CPUG. I think they used to be Mac people, but now they're just, it's this huge meeting of nerds, mostly post-production and editing. And thank you. And the thing is that they have a whole series of presentations, usually about filters for NLEs and things like that. But I was particularly interested in this presentation put on by Hewlett-Packard about storage. Because why? Because we all shoot tremendous amounts of, I shoot onto SSDs all the time now. I shoot large ProRes files. I shoot all sorts of things that just suck up storage. Well, okay, fine. I have to download them. Then I have to back them up. Then, you know, in the best of worlds, I'd back them up again, but that doesn't ever happen. So what do I do? And this speaker began to address that issue. But the funny thing is, he never answered the question. Instead, he ended up trying to sell us one of their workstations. And I thought, that's exactly what the problem is. So each year when I'm in NAB, I'm looking for archival solutions. Last year, I was looking for a Thunderbolt LTO6, and I found one from M-Logic, which I gave a talk about. I think I mentioned it here. This year, I found an LTO6 with USB 3.0 from IBM. Now, why is this a big deal? Because most LTO6 has SAS connectors on the back, and most of us don't use them. We simply don't in the consumer world or prosumer world. And in my professional world, we use USB 3.0, we use Thunderbolt. And why don't any of these have that? Well, now IBM has finally woken up a little bit. I went over to M-Logic and I asked them where they stood. And I'm particularly interested in LTO7. And they promised that by IBC, they'll have an LTO7 drive with Thunderbolt. Now, why is that a big deal? Because if you look at the I hung out over at the LTO consortium booth for a while, and if you look at these LTO storage, Generation 6, 6.25 terabyte, and you go, well, that's a lot of storage for a tape. In fact, that's not true, because this is based on a 2.5 times compression, which is how they market these tapes. Now, to the most of the industry, I mean, if you're a bank and you're storing bank records, it probably pertains to you, but video files can't be compressed much more than they already are, so this is meaningless to us. So in effect, we're getting less than half of that storage. So for me, that's not enough storage, less than half of this. Now, once we get to LTO7, it's going to go up past 6 terabytes in true storage. That's when I'm interested. And I'm just holding my breath because I've got a wall full of hard drives, including backups, and I'm just holding my breath to the end of the year. So that was a big discovery to, and confirmation that I was on the right track. Over at Panasonic, they've introduced an archival disk system. It's the answer to Sony's optical disk archive system. similar capacities. The problem is, and I love the concept of optical, the tracks inside are not, the pits aren't made with organic dyes. They're made with a crystalline substance that has about a 50-year archival life. The problem is they don't have the capacity, and they're not going to have the capacity, not at the rate in which we're recording data. So they're building these robotic, large cabinets that can swap. Each of these cartridges has 12 discs inside. That's what this is meant to show. I had the guy break it apart for me. But the point is that that's not practical for my world, and I don't think it's practical for many worlds. So I'm going to go with LTO as soon as 7 comes out in the fall, hopefully. Thunderbolt. Lenses, not getting any smaller. Over at Fuji, they have a set of custom handles for these giant lenses, which I thought meant something. Anamorphics are back at the bottom. These are Cooks, and these are Cook anamorphics. They've got a complete set now. Now, anamorphics are back. Well, anamorphics are now really, really popular. I noticed Arri introduced an anamorphic version of what I call an already extraordinary lens, the 9.1 to 18. This lens is so wide that you almost see behind yourself. You have to try it. You don't believe me, but you have to try it. It is extraordinary. Now it's about this big. It's very heavy. It's not what you look at it and think it's this big old zoom. Well, it's not really. It's a small zoom, but it is extraordinary. In fact, it's better optically than quite a number of their own primes, which they will admit to you. They've come out with an anamorphic version, so that tells you, and they've barely come out with the 9.1 to 18, so that tells you already. The 19 to 36 up here acknowledges the fact that the angle of view is twice as wide in anamorphic. Already, this tells you that this is going to be a popular lens. And then Arri came out with something else that just kind of blew my mind. People don't want anamorphic lenses only because they're widescreen. They want them because they want the flares, and they want the optical flaws. I'm a lens man. I ran an optical testing center once, and for me, I was always trying to get rid of flaring, ghosting, and veiling glare. But in fact, people want that. One of the complaints about Arri's lenses, and their anamorphics in particular, is that they didn't have any of that because they were too well designed. So at NAB, Arri came out with with a system of little additions in front and in back that add 4 distinct looks in terms of flares and veiling glare and ghosting. Go figure. Anyway, Canon's Cine Servo 50 to 1000. Now this is something. This lens, well, I call it Larry's. It's not called Larry's Gorilla. There's really a gorilla here. This is Larry, and this is the gorilla up here. And Larry's looking at the camera that has the 50 to 1000 on it. Now, Larry's looking at the lens at 1000 because at exactly 100 meters away, which is approximately up in here, he put a gorilla on the ceiling, a stuffed gorilla. And over here, he's zooming, and now he's zoomed he's zoomed all the way back now, and you can see the gorilla right there if you're close enough. I'll go back again. Whoops. That's the gorilla at 1,000 millimeters. Here he's zooming, and that's the gorilla at 50 millimeters. Little thing back there at exactly 100 meters. And this is Larry exultant. He'd been bragging about this lens for some time, and it's extraordinary. He's very, very proud of it. It is 4K. 4K. Now, Canon came out with something else last year that is also breakthrough, flat-out breakthrough. There's a bias in the industry that autofocus is for amateurs, and I always laugh at that stuff, because the best stuff like, I don't know, automatic white tracing came out of the amateur world. Lots of things that we take for granted now. Dual pixel is remarkable because it's not your grandfather's autofocus. Most autofocus works on a contrast principle. You have to have a contrasty image, and then it slowly kind of comes into focus, and then it often goes past focus and comes back a little bit and hunts and pecks a little bit. And that's because it doesn't really know where the focus is. It's looking at the contrast of the image. Dual pixel is something completely different. There are pixels in the plane of the sensor which are split in half. And it uses an effect that's a little bit like, remember the old microprisms in SLRs where you focused and they had the little prisms and the image would go back and forth and then align? It's that principle. So dual pixel, which is what Apple calls focus pixel, because they've got it in their iPhone 6, the big one, same thing, but Canon put it since last year in their cameras, and I gotta tell you, it's the best thing since sliced bread. The thing about dual pixel autofocus is it does not hunt and peck, because it knows, because of the geometries involved, if the focus is in front of or behind. It does not need contrast. It goes zzz, right like that, and it nails focus. Now, why is that important? Because a lot of us are running around with large sensor cameras, and we think we're in focus. You know, if you're filming somebody and they're rocking back and forth slightly, they're going in and out of focus half the time if you're wide open. I can't tell you how often you see this when you really look. It bedevils all of us. Autofocus that's dual pixel never loses the focus. So Canon's system is even more interesting because it's actually a hybrid system. It starts out with, it blends contrast-based autofocus because that's very good at coarse focus, and then the dual pixel takes over and brings it home. So I want to show you really quickly what that looks like. They've added another feature. As I said, this came out last year. Originally it was an add-on, but now with their new Canon C300 Mark II, now it's built in. And with the new C100, the new Mark II, it's built in. And they've added another feature. This is what I want to show you. I've got a short little video. It's about 20 seconds long. What happens down here is, imagine you don't want to use autofocus because you're too professional. But you'd sure like for autofocus to tell you whether you're right or not with your focus. So what if the autofocus circuit were on and there was a little box in the center of the frame, and when you hit focus, it turned green? Nobody has to know but you that you're using it. So can you run the video really quickly? There's no sound. You'll just see how this works. I just took a picture of it. Now the funny thing about this is that Sony had this in a camera called the VX1000 back in a long time ago. And I always told Larry Thorpe that he should have it in his HD cameras. Now, see what's happening? That's what you want to look at right here. See it go green? Now we'll go out of focus again. Now we're out of focus. Now watch those three little hash marks on top. Boom, we're in focus. Cool, huh? I can't tell you how revolutionary this is, and my prediction is within a year or two, every other camera is going to have something similar. How can they not? Because as we get more Ks, we have more of a chance of not focusing those Ks. Because the sharper the image becomes, the more chance we have of not hitting focus. I can't tell you how true that is. Viacom, live long and prosper, from Planet Viacom. No, it's Andrew Finkel demonstrating what Viacom does. This is a display. The Viacom actually creates this display if you're interested, and it shows you, it's weighing these different parts of the image in terms of how it's deciding where to put its autofocus. Interesting, huh? These are getting very sophisticated. Now, this fellow I ran into, he's from Beijing, and he had a very cool idea. Why not reverse engineer the protocols of Canon EF lenses so that you can control the automatic features in them? And that's what he's done with this. And so he's able to focus and zoom by using this little, you see a little dial on this hand grip down here, and you see this little motor that's attached to the lens here. He's controlling the. I thought it was very cool. There's so much innovation out there right now. Now, this is my little. I just want to celebrate for a moment all the birds that were flying around. This year there was actually an official aerial robotics and dome pavilion. This is my favorite drone that I came across. There were two sanctuaries I found, North Hall and South Hall. There were nests you could find. Care and handling of these birds. Here's one at rest. It's sleeping. It's like a stork on one leg. Here's a nocturnal one. And if you look at the payload, it's actually a C300 Mark II. So these are fairly heavy cameras, If I go back to the actually, I've got a picture of that here. Large birds. Now, here's Arri Alexa Mini takes flight. But, okay, fine. What's this lens? This is a Canon Cine Zoom. Have you picked one of those up? They are heavy. So my point is that these things are getting really massive, and they're getting very capable. I don't understand how the batteries can last that long, but I guess they do. A number of large birds. We saw them all over the place this year. And then there were small birds, too. Very cute. Ergonomics, you know, for a number of years I've been giving lectures on ergonomics. It's almost as if it's penetrated, I have to say. This is the Sony FS7, which to my mind has come the closest of any of the digital cinema cameras to being a true ergonomical camera. The hand grip almost meets my specification, which is that it acts like a computer mouse. I want to be able to control the entire camera from the hand grip because, why? Because I've got my eye on the viewfinder the whole time. I'm one man, I'm following somebody around. I can't take the camera off my shoulder and punch a button when I need to change something. This is a really extraordinarily well-designed hand grip. In fact, I think it's one of the best I've ever used. The big hook here is for your thumb. It holds, hello.
Black in the screen is the bottom button.
Do you want to show me how to, this one here?
Yeah.
Too complicated. Now, this camera looks like the Sony, but it isn't. This is the Blackmagic Mini Ursa, and this is what I told you. I'd get back to it. Look at this. Within a year, another camera company's figured out all the same things. They've even got 15-millimeter rods built in, which I think is fantastic. It looks kind of the same. It's got the hand grip hanging down here. It's got the viewfinder up here. Not bad at all. Congratulations to Blackmagic. I hope the camera works. Now, on ergonomics, every year I always take pictures of some of the idiocy that I see, camera idiocy. Now, this is a Sony FS7, which you just saw was ergonomic, compact, small, magnesium frame, very light. It's under 5 pounds. What the hell is this? What's this vertical stuff all the way up and down? I don't get it. Okay, and then there's this guy. Now, believe it or not, there's a Sony FS7 buried in there. What? Don't they know that lenses can have, you know, optical stabilization? I don't know. The thing's less than 5 pounds. What are they doing? Now, this one cracked me up, too. I don't know if you can see. He's got the big weight here. He's got the big brick battery. He's got all the shoulder crap. He's got the camera over here. Well, that's this camera. What is he doing? And the same thing here. These are two Blackmagic cameras. There's one there. What are they doing? These are small handheld cameras. What has he got all this rigging up for? This guy wants to carry his lighting studio around as if you're doing fashion videos. That's okay. I mean, it's a Canon 5D. I just have never seen that before. I can't explain this one. She's pointed up there. Now, this is perhaps my favorite guy. This guy is using a selfie stick. Now, why is he using a selfie stick? Is he taking a picture of himself? No, he's getting those hard-to-get close-ups. You see this stuff, and you just don't know what to say. So NAB was hardly all work and no play. You can see, you know, we're all a bunch of goofballs, and everybody wants to have fun. You have booth parties, beer. I've never seen so many booth parties as this year, and I've never seen so much alcohol on the floor, but that's another story. I have a series of little awards I'm going to give to booths now. This is the funnest booth design, because when you poke inside, you see what they're really doing. This is the silliest one. Someone needs to explain to them that those daisies are ridiculous looking. This is the trippiest one. You don't want to be doing drugs in this booth. This is Autodesk. This is the booth boasting the biggest Oscar. You see it's Asus, and they have their own restaurant. That's a joke. This is the booth with the most pixel pushing. That's a Rubik's Cube mosaic, and I thought that was pretty impressive. You can tell that I was covering a lot of ground at NAB. A second year running, this is the hardest working booth, Canon lens repair. They actually had these guys repairing lenses, which I thought, I just stood for 20 minutes and watched. Fascinating, fascinating, fascinating. Hats off. Coolest booth furniture, believe it or not, Microsoft. I want some of those little chairs. The logo that most resembled Enron's. Someone should tell them, but you know. Booths I never expected to see at NAB. I don't know what FEMA's doing there. I looked for NSA, but I couldn't find them. There was no trace of them. These guys up here getting ready to ship out somewhere in the world. I don't want to know. Now, last year, this was the most offensive booth. Now, you know where I'm going. This is Atomos. This year, they discovered pasties. So even though she's painted, and she's otherwise almost completely naked, in theory, she has two little pasties. You know, it's Vegas. Pasties are easy to come by. This year's most offensive booth, by unanimous decision, is red. Now, why am I saying that? I've filmed a good many of the death camps in Europe. I've been in war zones. I'm looking at this and going, huh? I'm not trying to be censorious. I'm the last person in the world that really feels that way. I just don't know what this says. What are they selling? This is a shot of this guy plunging a drill into this woman. Okay, now, any interpretations? And what's with the death head? Again, been around too much of that stuff. What is with that? Bothers me. On an upbeat note, the best meal at NAB. This is the reason to look forward to returning to Vegas, because after you've been there 25 times, what else is there to see? Now, if you go to this place, it's Highland Drive, far side of I-15, Kisleb Center. You can get electronic supplies, plumbing, choppers fixed, LED lighting, Christian radio broadcast from there, and then there's Roll and Smoke Barbecue. Look at this. Now, this is courtesy of Mitch Gross, Convergent Design, and I was one happy camper. Damn good. Thank you. That's my presentation. It really is good barbecue.
Well, thank you very much, David.
I'm from the South, so I know.
Fantastic. Our next speaker needs no introduction, so without further ado, please welcome Mark Schubin to the podium.
So, are there any questions? Let's see. David showed you the NAB theme of Crave More. He didn't mention, however, the creature that came with it, which was a mindless creature that just wanted more, a sort of Cookie Monster, except I think Cookie Monster has greater restraint. So I think, let's see, am I pushing the right one? Yeah, we should crave more respect. And what kind of respect should we crave? Well, for fairness, for one thing. You may have seen a bunch of the publications have, this was the best of show, these are the awards that we gave out. Whoops. Those are now pay to be nominated. Not a good idea. And how about women? I happen to have the quaint notion that women are human beings. As David pointed out, there are other people who have notions that women are objects who are used to sell products, like at the Atomos booth. And so I'm not going to show you the woman, but I'm going to show you the lack of crowds at the booth, which is appropriate. And how about intelligence? Let's start with this. There were many, many demos at NAB. Here was a virtual set demo, and no one even says anything. I've blacked out the name of the company because it's possible, you know, they didn't get it done in time for NAB or whatever. But for crying out loud, say, well, you know, we didn't get it done in time. We're sorry we have this. But just booth after booth after booth would have these demos, and no one would say boo about it. Then there were non-lies. So here's a booth, live sounding weather. And then there were outright lies. So here's another booth. This is a phrase that you saw frequently at NAB, zero latency. I'm going to show you a little video now. It's from 2012. See that thing moving slowly across the screen? That's a pulse of light going through the bottle. This is a camera that shoots 1 trillion frames per second. There are now 2 Japanese labs that have gotten it up to 4.4 trillion frames per second. But at that speed, you can see light moving. Now, even light has latency. So there is no such thing as zero latency. So I asked, yeah, let's see how much ish is. So I asked at one booth, what does zero latency mean? And that's what I got, about 90 milliseconds. Well, if you're talking about a prompter feed or something, that's pretty close to zero. If you're talking about turning on the lights in the studio, that's very close to zero, no problem. But for video, that's a bit of a problem. At the top is something from a camera brochure. This is a camera that was introduced at the show. And they say that the newly developed optical system supports the wide color gamut of ITUR BT 2020, enabling more precise color reproduction of live broadcasts. And they're absolutely right about BT 2020. This is a diagram from the Extron website. And there's Rec 709, which is what most of us are using, or even less than that. And there's BT 2020, goes really farther down into the reds, farther out in the blues, and way, way up in the greens. So that's very impressive for this new camera. But notice that they have not just an asterisk, but a 1. So here's what the thing says. ITUR BT 2020 is the specification of video format defined by ITUR. The camera does not cover it in full. Okay, how much of it does it cover? We're not going to tell you. One side only. So IP was a big thing at the show. Absolutely wonderful because you can use commodity components. So there's an IP router, $25 including shipping. But if your facility is not yet all IP, then you need to convert between HDSDI and IP. So here is an Extron product shown at the show that does that. I tried to get the price on it. I couldn't get the price, so all I could find was that the replacement power supply is $250. IP is wonderful because you don't need a central router, but of course there are differences of opinion about that. So there's the Evertz router that I showed you last year. And then Jason talked about at-home production. I like the term that NEP's George Hoover came up with, remoting the remote. Here is a picture of a production truck. This one is All Mobile Video's Titan. And let's say we had got super advanced technology so we could reduce all of the electronics on this truck down to a single chip. What would happen to the size of the truck? Be exactly the same size. Because of all those people in it, all of them have monitoring, all of them have control surfaces, and so Jason really covered very well the idea of not sending personnel around. On site you need A2s, utilities, maintenance, and maybe stage managers, but graphics, recording playback, director, AD, TD, audio mixer, and even camera operators don't necessarily have to travel. We have remote cameras that people use. So this was a super session that NAB had on IP, and every one of the people on that stage was just gung-ho for IP, but not everyone in the audience was. And so one person said, what about the standards? And these are just different standards that are used for IP. This is not even getting into video. So there are some problems. Then we have superlatives. NAB 2015 was brought to you by World's First Corporation. So here is a story. I've trimmed the headline a little bit again so you don't see who it is, but this is so-and-so announces the world's first handheld 8K UHD camera system, and you can see from the date that this is 2015. Of course, this is something that was introduced 2 years ago, and it's a handheld 8K camera system. Not sure that was the first one. Countryman, by the way, continues to show uncredited scenes from the 2010 Live from Lincoln Center South Pacific. And then we have instant change. So HDR, high dynamic range. This was a display. David said that you can't really shoot it. Well, you can if you have two monitors side by side. So the left is standard dynamic range, the right is high dynamic range. This is a JVC. They have the monitor, they have the camera, so you're all set to go. So here's another high dynamic range image. The only light that is in this studio is coming from the lamp that is pointed straight into the lens. And yet you can make out every chip on the chip chart. So this is clearly high dynamic range. Some of you might recall this image because I showed it here when it was first shown at NAB in 2008. And that's using the Grass Valley Sensium CMOS sensor, 10 million to 1 contrast ratio in that image, more than 23 stops. You can see the individual coils of the filament down there at the right. Wonderful picture. Grass Valley has not yet implemented it in one of their cameras. And then we have utter nonsense. So here we have, you saw this in one of David's images. This is a snow shield for a satellite dish. And you will be pleased to note that it is Ultra HD. It's the largest thing on there. And then we have, these people have a filter, real 4K filter for film, a breakthrough in optical HD glass. So what is Ultra HD? As you heard before, there's higher dynamic range, wider color gamut, higher frame rate, more immersive sound, higher resolution. Ultra HD originally meant 4 times HD resolution in each direction. Now that's called 8K, and then there's also 4K. So you might recognize this slide. Also, I showed this in 2010. The elephant in the room then was stereoscopic 3D, and the elephant in the room at this year's NAB was 4K. So why 4K? Well, there's 2 main reasons. One, you get better pictures, and 2 is the ability to zoom in post or wherever by a factor of 2 to 1, so you can extract HD and do reframing. Both seem quite worthy. So this was something wonderful that was at NAB. It was at the Astro booth. 55-inch screen, which they called the world's smallest 8K display. And up close, it was absolutely amazing. You could stay there for an hour and watch this thing. At home viewing distance, looked like HD. This is the typical 8K viewing distance. And wherever there's an 8K screen, that's what you see. At home viewing distance, again, looks kind of like HD. Now, 4K has a problem because you don't do this with 4K. It's not enough difference, so you don't even have the up-close viewing. There was a 4K display at Ikegami's booth, 293-inch. So that works if you have more than 12-foot ceilings. So, does 4K give you better pictures? And the answer is yes. On the left is a diagram of some European Broadcasting Union tests that they did. The red line is at 1.5 times the picture height, which for a 55-inch screen is 40 inches away viewing. And the black line is, the other way around. Red line is at typical viewing distance of 2.7 meters, and the black line is at 1.5 times the picture height. So you're getting between 1/2 grade and 1/3 grade of improvement. So that comes out to 16 times the data per grade of improvement. Now, I've normalized the vertical scale. If you look at higher frame rate, for every doubling of the frame rate, you get a full grade of improvement. So that's twice the data rate for a full grade of improvement. And if we go to high dynamic range, then depending on how you do it, between 0 and 0.2 increase in data rate, again, for a full grade of improvement. So 4K gives you the least significant improvement. It's not that it's not there. It does make better picture, but it's not a lot better picture. It's just a little bit better picture. So how about the zooming in by a factor of 2? So here's a typical HD sports picture, and the theory is that I could zoom into any one of those quadrants and get the exact same quality. And as far as the camera is concerned, if it's a true 4K camera, and we'll get to that in a moment, that's true. But there's something between the scene and the camera, and that's the lens. So here's an HD lens, and where it says 100 down at the bottom, 100 line pairs per millimeter, that's HD resolution. And where it says 200 at the far right, that's 4K resolution. So this is what contrast the lens is giving you, and this is a very high-end HD lens. This is a lens that's, something approaching $100,000. Sharpness, by the way, is based on the area under the curve. If you view the RCA camp, it's the square of the area. If you use the Zeiss camp, it's the area itself. So to get more sharpness, you need a lot more area under the curve. Then here's another thing that was introduced at the show. Somebody came out with an 8K camera, and they said, oh, we have a system expander, and it allows you to use these studio lenses and field lenses that you're currently using. So now do your own extrapolation. The 400 that I've done at the right, that's where 8K would be. So figure out where those curves go by the time you get out to 8K, and how much contrast are you getting. So you may zoom in by a factor of 2 to 1, but the lens doesn't want you to zoom in by a factor of 2 to 1. It's not going to give you the contrast. So here's a typical HD field camera lens, extremely well standardized. The standard BTA S1005A even tells you what different planes there are for the colors, because there's going to be some chromatic differences. We have a long-range zoom lens on there, 101 to 1 in this particular case. So let's say we look at the just 4 pixels on the sensor in that camera. The camera has 3 of those sensors. Each pixel is roughly 5 microns by 5 microns. And there's 1920 by 1080 photo sites per sensor, and there's 3 sensors. And light has noise, so the camera manufacturers have decided that roughly this 5 micron by 5 micron size of the photo site is pretty good for averaging out the light noise. Well, what if we want to go 4K? Well, one thing we could do is go to a larger sensor. And indeed, in the year 2000, Lockheed Martin came out with a prototype 4K camera, basically the same thing, prism, very large sensors, telecentric lens adapter. But as you can see from David's show, that's not something you would want to put on your shoulder. So option 2, everybody came out with right away, was let's go to a single chip with a color filter on it. And most of them are using what's called a Bayer filter. But let's separate out the 3 colors, as I've done up on the top right there. The red has only 2K resolution. The blue has only 2K resolution. They are not 4K. They are just 2K. The green has sort of 4K resolution, but it's what we call quincunx, which means it's got a lot less resolution in the diagonals than it does in the vertical and horizontal, which means that you have to upconvert the red and the blue. Now you can call it something else, but you have to do it. And you cannot do perfect optical low-pass filtering, because if you do an optical low-pass for the red or the blue, then you're cutting off the green resolution. And if you do an optical low-pass for the green, then you're letting aliases through in the red and the blue. So this is not delivering 4K. So here is my view of the red booth. This is the outside of the red booth. It's one of the largest signs at NAB, and it says, "Up-resing not spoken here." Says Jim Gennard in 2006. And so that reminds me of the stories about Florida banning climate change talk. It doesn't stop climate change, it just says maybe you can't talk about it. Whether you call it up-resing or upscaling or up-conversion or de-bayering or de-mosaicing, whatever you're doing, you have to up-convert the red and the blue. Lens considerations for those single sensors. Well, most of them are PL mount, and they use prime lenses primarily, that's fine. The large format tends to mean narrower depth of field. David was telling you about people rocking in and out and going in and out of focus. But let's say you want to use one of those field lenses, you can get an adapter that'll go from the 2/3 inch format lens to the Super 35 sensor. But if it's absolutely perfect, you're losing 2.6 stops, which is roughly 600% of the light. And again, the MTF, the modulation transfer function of the lens, the amount of contrast it's letting through, is HD. It's not 4K. So this year at NAB, all 5 of the manufacturers of field cameras came out with some sort of solution for what they're calling 4K using B4 mounts. So here's Panasonic's in the AKUC 3000. It's a 1-inch format sensor, as David mentioned, which means you're only doing a 16:11 optical reduction rather than a 22:11 or something like that. And by building it into the camera and having a B4 mount on the camera, that allows them to do lens correction. So they can do the chromatic correction that they've been doing. Here's Ikegami and Sony. Both of them have 3 CMOS 4K sensors. These are true 4K cameras. These are the first true 4K cameras since the Lockheed Martin. 2/3 inch sensors, so you can use the 2/3 inch lenses. Everything works out fine, except we're no longer 5 microns by 5 microns for the photo site. We're 2.5 microns by 2.5 microns, and light has noise. And so the sensitivity on the Sony camera, which had specs, is lower than the sensitivity of their non-4K camera. Then we have a diagonal offset. Hitachi, this they introduced at IBC last year, has 2 green sensors. These are 4 HD sensors, and they have a 1/2 pixel diagonal offset between the 2 greens, which means you need an extra prism element to split the light, which gives you a sensitivity issue, and then you have Bayer-like processing to come back to the 4K. And then we have Grass Valley, and Jason said, you know, this is a camera that people are really excited about. It's an HD camera. It's got 3 HD sensors, it's got HD optics, everything is totally HD, except it's got an up converter that gives you a 4K output. But that's not so bad, because the optics match everything. The sensors, the optical low-pass filter, the lens, everything matches. And so you can do an up conversion that's maybe better than you could do on some of the others. So with all 5 of the manufacturers of field cameras coming out with B4 4K cameras, there are also lens prototypes. And so there's Canon's field prototype. I don't know much about it because it was just prototype. But Fujinon had 2 products, one a 22:8, very, very similar to what you would have in HD, and the other an 80:9, a little bit less than maybe what you would have in a typical field lens now, but one heck of a lens. So there's the HD MTF, and there's the 4K MTF. And they're getting 4K contrast now that's approximating what you were getting from HD on the HD lens. It's also got more transmission. So it actually makes a more sensitive camera rather than less sensitive. Less reflection, shifted peak performance. This is kind of interesting. On most of the HD lenses, the peak performance is about f4. But on this camera, the peak performance is, on this lens, peak performance is about f1.8. So works even better when you have less light. Then this was a red introduction, their 8K version, and it's got a 46.3 millimeter diagonal. Now, full frame 35 millimeter, like the Canon 5, that would be a 43.3 millimeter diagonal. Now, most lenses probably give you a little bit extra, so that's not going to be an issue. But if they don't, those little red ears sticking out there are going to vignette, and the lens won't give it to you. Now, VistaVision is a little bit bigger than that, but I don't know how many people have VistaVision lenses left. This was something that 4A had. It's the HBC 3600 camera. Looks like a nice daytime shot, but the inset is showing you it's actually a nighttime shot. Extremely sensitive camera. David talked about the small HD side finder, so I won't mention anything about that. But Shenzhen Imagine Vision, this was kind of interesting. That's a 20:1 HD zoom camera about the size of my thumb. On the left here, this looks like a fluorescent tube lighting instrument, and so what's the big deal? They're not fluorescent tubes. They are LEDs that are exciting phosphors. So that was kind of interesting to me. The middle at the bottom, in case you thought that segways were too big, these are some smaller things that people were riding around. The middle at the top, this is Andra follow focus. David talked about autofocus. This is a different thing. You give your talent a little something to wear, and then you put this where you're shooting, and it just nails the focus all the time. They can come in and out of the shot. She would go outside of the shot and then just jump in at different places, always in focus. You saw from David before the aces. This is one of the most important things at the show, aside from having the largest Oscar. It allows you to use a variety of different cameras and have them match perfectly. And then this was kind of interesting. It's called virtual backgrounds. And basically, it's like a prompter that you stick in front of a camera, but instead of having a prompter monitor here, they have a projector. And you can put anything you want on the video projector, any kind of background. And then you have a retroreflective surface behind the talent. And so you see in the viewfinder what the background is. It's like green screen, except there's no green screen. There's no processing. You actually see in the viewfinder what you're getting. Then here is the Fraunhofer light field demo. Now, they've shown us many things over the years. You can refocus in post, decide what's in focus, what isn't. You can reframe in post. You can re-iris in post and get high dynamic range. Well, at NAB 2015, they showed you that we can relight in post. And then this was another interesting thing related to depth. This was at NTT's booth, and they're saying that for the 2020 Olympics in Tokyo, they are going to set up theaters around the world where they are going to have the athletes sent separately from the stadium. And they'll maybe have some physical elements in the theaters so it'll feel more like the stadium. So they're calling the thing Kirari. There at the top, they separate out the actors using, or the athletes using the z-axis. They transmit what they want to transmit of the stadium, and then you see them combined in this theater. Virtual reality, a bunch of that around the show, and this is Google's version. And the reason it's cardboard, you can see at the top left there, you stick your own smartphone in there and you can get VR out of it. This you saw from somebody, I don't remember, maybe it was, it was Mark in his pre-show, Unilumin. This is a Chinese company, and that's their LED wall, and there's lots of people with wonderful LED walls, and that big wall has 1.6 millimeter dot pitch, which is really great. That's what everybody else has. But see the little wall over there? That has 0.8 millimeter dot pitch. That's half of what anybody else has been showing. And it's extraordinary. It's like a TV set. So you can stick that behind your talent and zoom in and not see any moire or anything. It's extraordinarily fine pitch. Here's another display. This is outside at noon in the Las Vegas sun. You can see from the chair over here, this is that part of the chair making that much of a shadow on it. And this is right smack in the sun, and there's full detail, full color. This is actually not at NAB, but this was at the HPA Tech Retreat, That's Jan Fröhlich from Dolby, and he was showing wide color gamut using the Christie 3P laser projection, which has high output, no scintillation whatsoever because there's a whole bunch of laser sources, high dynamic range, and almost full BT 2020. It doesn't quite hit it on the blue, but basically there. And that was at NAB. They were showing their projector. JVC had kind of a mesh network that you can use for wireless. A bunch of people were showing that kind of thing. Film is not dead. And this I liked, IBM, experiences made with IBM. So experiences are when you watch TV, apparently. And that's all I've got to say. Shall we assume the positions?
Yes, please. Well, yes, please. Well, that was fantastic, guys. Thank you very much. My hat's off to you for an extraordinary presentations from everyone, including Roberta for the SMPTE part of the show. So as a reminder, we are being recorded here, and when either Bruce or John Ciccone hands you the microphone, please just state your name and company affiliation so we know that. And we are still in communication with the Long Island section by two-way video conference. So when they are ready to pose a question, we have it prearranged that they'll just unmute their video conferencing device, and we'll be able to put them on the screen, and we'll interact with them directly. So would anyone like to ask the first question of the evening to any of the panelists? Don't be shy, speak right up. I'm sure someone has a question here. There's one right there.
I'll ask one.
Okay,
Just wait for the
wait for the microphone. And state your name and company.
Thank you. Jonathan Abrams, Nutmeg. Mark, you just mentioned at the end of your presentation that Christie has a projector that almost hits 2020, not quite. I see a lot of companies making displays says hits 98% of P3. 2020 is larger than P3. Is anybody going to make a display, forget a projector for the moment, that can actually hit P3 or can hit 2020, or is this just something that is unattainable?
I think that they can. Sorry. They come extremely, extremely close, and I think with a little bit of tuning of the laser, they could hit 2020. It's just tiny, tiny bit out, and you don't really notice it so much in the blue anyway. The red is what really knocks you flat. At the HPA Tech Retreat, let's see, maybe I should move this closer up. At the HPA Tech Retreat, they were just setting up the projector and doing full screen in the primary colors. So they had a red screen, a blue screen, and a green screen. And every time the red screen went up, you would hear people in the room just going, "Oh, I've never seen anything like that before."
Thank you.
Sure.
Do we have another question?
I'll do one. Hey, Mark.
Right there.
Did anybody use a Fitbit? What was your mileage?
I don't
Your
know.
mileage may vary.
I have to add up the number of aisles.
I'm too scared to use one. I'm afraid that it might terrify me, seeing how much you'd walk.
Might wear out your Fitbit.
They don't wear out.
Matthew Brennisholtz, consultant. You talked a lot about color gamut and high dynamic range and, of course, 4K and 8K. What about high frame rates? What went on in terms of high frame rates?
There wasn't a lot new at the show. You heard from Jason about cameras that will do 6 times or 8 times. All the other higher frame rates, slow motion cameras, the usuals were there, vision research and so on. So you know, it's there. It's got the same issues that it's always had, which is the reduction in sensitivity as you reduce the exposure time. But it's great. And then outside of NAB, as I showed you, you can get up to 4.4 trillion frames per second now.
The trick is, though, distribution. The distribution side, while it may be good for slow-mo and things, there's very little work on practical means of distribution to the home. You know, some of the TV displays that have frame doubling in them already can do some higher frame rates, but not necessarily refreshing all the pixels with new content across an HDMI connection, for example. There's a lot of work to be done in that.
Over at the over at the NHK 8K exhibit, there was a big display showing 8K 120 frames per second, and it was of a soccer match. And I sat there and took stills trying to capture something, and I looked at them later. And here's one of the stills I captured. I wish I had included it, but I didn't go to the 4Ks in my presentation. When you increase temporal resolution by, we're watching television now, what, 30 frames per second basically.
Well, 60 pictures a second.
Increase it by a factor of 2. What happens when someone kicks a soccer ball and that soccer ball is flying through the air and it's spinning, and soccer balls are black and white typically, is that, well, it's a blur. And we know the ball goes because we watch it, we follow it with our eyes. But I caught stills at a very high frame rate with my camera, and you can see in the 8K 120 frame per second, you can see the marking on the ball as it's spinning. And then I looked again, and I looked and I looked and I looked, and you know what? The 120 frames per second is much sharper. It's much more lifelike in a satisfying way. The thing that throws me about that, all that stuff is highly compressed. It has to be, because they're broadcasting HK and they're demonstrating that as well. And it's 8-bit. So within those constraints, the higher frame rates are really quite astonishing, particularly when it comes to sports. And I know that no one practically is taking advantage of that. But I look forward to it.
Right, just for fun, under the perfect circumstances, it looks gorgeous. Every year I get to go to NHK Research Labs in Tokyo, and they have exactly what you're talking about, probably the same footage, next to 60 frames a second. And it's tremendous how you see the difference, especially because it's almost, I mean, I'd want Mark to maybe follow up on this, but it's almost that when you're at the lower frame rate at 8K, the motion blur in really high action sports almost looks worse to me. I don't know if that's just me, but it needs that frame rate because that increased resolution. You see that motion blur and the players going by, and it's very distracting. But at the 120 frames a second, it's tremendous. Once you get to distribution and the compression, same thing. The way that 3D always looked amazing in the truck, and then you get home and you're like, well, that looks like shit. It's similar. But in the perfect circumstances at NHK's research labs, oh man, does it look amazing.
As Jason said, if you have some rate of panning, let's say, or rate of motion that you find acceptable, let's say it's 1 pixel per second, just to take some ridiculous number. If you go from HD to 4K, well, now you have 2 pixels per second. And if you go from 4K to 8K, now you have 4 pixels per second. So the higher the spatial resolution, the higher the temporal resolution you need for the same acceptable frame rate.
And you really can see
same acceptable motion.
You can really see it too with your eyes if you've ever seen that demonstrated. It's not subtle.
All right, there's some BBC some papers, but there's also Dr. Sean McCarthy from ARIS has published a lot of papers on vision science, both in the temporal and spatial domains, and they're actually fascinating. And I think actually some of his literature is going to be put into the SMPTE HDR study group report.
Yeah, I mentioned before that if you look at even an 8K display from typical home viewing distance, looks like HD. But if you see high frame rate, even across the room, it's high frame rate.
Speaking of high dynamic range, I actually did shoot side-by-sides, but you can't capture side-by-sides with a camera that's not high dynamic range. But the reason I'm bringing this up is that I went and saw JVC had a demo, Sony had a demo. Oh gosh, there were a whole bunch of people that had demos. The best I saw was Sony's. I don't know how you felt. And I have to say, it was really convincing. They had this little scenario where this couple was camping by the side of a lake, and Mount Fuji or something similar is in the background. Beautiful lake. And the sun is rising up behind Mount Fuji, and then it's setting at the end of the day. So when the sun comes bursting through, the sky achieves this color, which in the high dynamic range version was glorious and subtle, subtly hued, like pinks and salmons and whatnot, and subtle purples, missing from the standard dynamic range. And then they had a fire at night, and the fire is crackling and burning, and you can look right into the flames in the high dynamic range, and you can't see that in the standard. It was really convincing.
But one caution, just as higher spatial resolution demands higher frame rate, higher dynamic range also demands higher frame rate. Because if you don't have enough frame rate for the motion that you're watching, there are aliases that occur, but the aliases tend to be at lower level, and so you don't notice them. But with higher dynamic range, you're raising those aliases to a higher level, and you do make them noticeable. So high dynamic range demos tend to look more juddery than non-high dynamic range demos.
You know, it also demands more capture and storage and archiving, because you're capturing more data to create a higher frame rate, however you slice it. No?
For a higher frame rate, yes.
Higher frame rate.
For higher dynamic range, no. There's two different things. There's number of gray levels, and then there's dynamic range. And you can capture higher dynamic range at exactly the same data rate that you're doing low dynamic range. If you decide you need more gray levels,
At
then
the
you
same
need
bit
more
depth?
bits.
Don't you want to go to a higher bit depth, ideally?
Not necessarily.
But we will.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to just getting away from 8-bit display panels. 10 bits
Yes.
to the home will be fabulous.
Yes.
Forget the dynamic range. Just get away from the contouring and compression artifacts.
I just want to quickly put in a little plug for our June 3rd meeting, which will be specifically on high dynamic range. So a topic that we have covered in depth here, and we'll do some more for that meeting. John, you're up.
John Gallagher, BMCC. But I'm actually speaking as the parent of a 17-year-old girl. And she's burned out 2 wireless access points in the past year and a half. And the reason why I'm bringing it up quite in those terms is she watches a lot of media, but she doesn't watch it on televisions. She watches it on something, that big. Mm-hmm. That's, she made me buy her second. She tends to drop iPhones in the bathtub too. But it seems to me like we have this big bear in the room that's looking at us very hungrily. We're talking about all this really wonderful stuff, but my teenager doesn't watch TV. She watches a phone, and she's watching it generally over a wireless access point that's pulling its data off of the most hated company in America. So, which means that she's also getting severe bottlenecks, and so it's something where we're getting all, we're moving toward this really wonderful world where things look really great, and where we're getting more bit rates and stuff like that. But what's the market actually going to bear? I wonder. I mean, did you see anything in the show about that would talk about this brave new world of teenagers?
Can I make one point? I've got a 21-year-old daughter, and it's a phase that your daughter is in right now. And as she gets older, she'll start watching bigger and bigger screens. You wouldn't want to watch Wolf Hall on PBS on a screen that big. The candlelit rooms wouldn't register.
She wants a watch.
But more
sure
to the
she
point
does.
of the data rate, if you double the frame rate in production, then if you want to keep stuff uncompressed through post, you have double the frame rate that you have to deal with and double the amount of bits. If you're going to 4K, you have 4 times the amount of bits that you have to deal with. If you're going to higher dynamic range, then maybe you need 20% more bits or something, depending on how you're doing it. But that's up to post. Once you get into distribution, you're using some form of entropy coding. And if you notice that MTF curve, it went like this. The higher frequency stuff has very little energy. So the increase in data rate for the distribution level, some people have said it can be as low as 5%. Maybe that's being optimistic, but if it's 25%, that's probably going to cover it. It's not going to be double. It's not going to be 4 times.
Right. On that, we did that historically when HBO converted over to a component tape format, as an example. The compression bandwidth went down 20%, just because the noise and composite artifacts versus a clean component signal. So when you go to higher quality pictures with higher spatial, higher temporal, the compression ratio doesn't necessarily follow that asymptotically.
Also, people still watch sports on big TVs, so I'm fine.
My daughter was so unimpressed that I met Joe Torre last week. It was heartbreaking.
It's the only thing that still brings people to the biggest screen, and hopefully that'll go for a while. But yeah, no, I agree. I have brothers that are 18, 16, and 11, and oh boy, I don't remember the last time any of them watched anything on TV. And in fact, if the exact same thing is on TV or on their phone, they'll watch it on their phone. Or watch it.
Of course, I grew up in Atlanta, and I have an autographed picture of Joe Torre, the catcher for the Braves.
Oh, nice.
I was at the Braves game where Hank Aaron hit his 500th. I'm from Chattanooga.
Yes, Fred.
Thank you. My name's Fred Huffman. I have a question for Jason, and then a question for Mark or David in a kind of an opposite area. The question has to do with the at-home production that you talked about and all those other descriptive names for it. The question is, do you see that moving up into the Olympics and the soccer stuff like we had in Brazil last year? And then the same thing maybe for Mark. Do you see that kind of technique being adopted in the kind of things that you do with Metropolitan Opera or other very expensive to stage and produce events?
Yeah, I mean, I'm glad you asked that, because one note I had that I forgot to mention is, I mean, most of these techniques actually came from the Olympics and the World Cup. Not came from, but really were deployed on a wide basis in these large events where, like I said, it's extremely expensive to get accreditations and fly people across the world and set up a big footprint in the IBC, the International Broadcast Center. So, NBC, for example, produced, speaking of curling, their entire curling show from Sochi in Stamford, essentially. They just were simply bringing back sources to a control room in Stamford, and they got it done. The smaller international broadcasters that don't pay however many billions the Peacock pays now for the Olympics do that almost across the board. I mean, Denmark, for example, I'm trying to remember the broadcaster, that's like DR2 or something like that. They had, I'm not exaggerating, they had something like 13 people there. It was less than 20, and it was just amazing because they would send everything back. The World Cup, you saw even more of it, especially when it came to producing, sending feeds around for digital distribution and those types of things. What a lot of people did with EVS Cast and some other similar type platforms that ESPN did in terms of just leaving things at home. Yes, there's no question, and you will see so much of that in Brazil next year. But for now in the U.S., it's really on the small scale. Although ESPN does for Monday Night Football, Fox for their Sunday NFL football games, they have all their post-production, not all their post-production, but most of it back home. They just pick and choose right from the truck what they want, and they turn around packages for the halftime and the post game. So it's making its way to bigger shows as well.
I've been made.
1996 was the first time NBC did an at-home.
Yeah, there you go. I mean, it's been going. It's really where these workflows came from. Yeah, I had the note and didn't plug it, but yeah, those large events. You're absolutely right. Of course, it's been going on forever, and this is just more of a larger manifestation on a wider scale. But yeah, I mean, NBC pioneered that, definitely.
I was surprised. I went on a tour of the Fox facility in Houston, and they actually had parsed out their games so that the line and down markers, they had coordinated wide shots because the B games had a central feed that did the line and down markers. They didn't have it on each of the games. They just shared one, and they would share it among feeds. Saved them a ton of money.
Yep.
I need to jump in here for a moment. I apologize. We are running a bit late. It's 8:40 now, so we're going to try to wrap it up in a few minutes. Next up is Bill. He has a question.
Not a question so much as a comment.
State your name, Bill.
Sorry, Bill Miller, Multimedia Technology. But when I was at ABC in 1980, we did at-home production on the Democratic Convention, and I consider that a sports event because Rue Knowledge was executive producer for ABC News at that time. And they were cross-pollinating between news and sports in terms of production techniques. But we, instead of having 11 mobile units at the Garden, we had 2. We had a workspace across the street that was empty except for the caterer, because everything else was left uptown on 66th Street. And we had a bunch of cameras. You had 12 feeds going up, 1 coming back. Worked perfectly.
Mm-hmm. And to answer Fred, who want to know what we're doing at the Met, all of our people are local, so it doesn't make any difference. What we would pay for a studio and getting the cameras would be more expensive than having the truck there. But we do have remote camera control even there. We've done as many as 6 cameras remoted at the Met to a different location where the camera operators are. Did a show in Princeton with 6 cameras remoted to a room where the camera operators were.
Next up is I wanted to give the Long Island subsection a chance, kind of last call if you want to ask a question. Now is the time to unmute your Polycom. If not, we'll take maybe one more question, and then we got to get everyone going home. So is there one last question from the floor?
Yes, this is Wes Simpson, Telecom Product Consulting. I was wondering about the V-Nova technology that I think you mentioned, Craig. Did anybody else see it? Were there any other impressions, good, bad, indifferent? And is this something that's really viable considering, I mean, does it have to be an end-to-end ecosystem, or are we going to have to replace everything from the camera to the display, or is it going to be a contribution format?
As always with a startup, you have to be skeptical of all their claims, but one of the claims that they have is that it can be a layer, either one-pass compression, similar to the promise of J2K, where it's a one-pass from which you can extract any resolution you wish. So you can start with 4K and end up with a cell phone, all with one pass, or it can be layered on top of an existing, for example, AVC MPEG-4 architecture, and you send the difference in a higher resolution. So again, many options. They've said that they were in stealth mode for 5 years. So they've had a lot of smart people working on some really cool stuff.
I saw it, but I can't tell you anything useful. The pictures I saw were pretty, but I don't know how it would react to other pictures. I don't like a compression system until I find out what breaks it.
Right.
And then I know what to do and how much I can shove in there. And they would not provide that information.
Right. I mean, I can only say to what people who are much more informed than I am tell me on the floor, but I know I had 2 people. One of the questions I always ask is, what's the first thing you're going to follow up after the show? 2 people said that was it, in terms of really being intrigued and trying to find out how they can institute it, or what's going to break it. You know, trying to read through all the buzz, because there was a lot of it around that at the show.
Shades of the HBO show Silicon Valley.
Right, yeah. They did point that out.
Did they?
Hey, wait, you're making fun of our product ending the launch.
To wrap it up, just another plug to join SMPTE today. You have seen what an extraordinary meeting this is. We are so thankful to have our distinguished panel of experts here. Please give them a good round of applause. Thank you so much. Kudos to you. And see you at the June 3rd meeting on high dynamic range.
And May 30th is there.
Yes. You will all be getting a e-blast probably tomorrow or so, telling you about the May 30th meeting, and another e-blast probably next week about the June 3rd meeting. Thank you very much.